This video is brought to you by BlueCert. BlueCert is a trusted provider for AI-related certifications designed to validate expertise in machine learning, data science, NLP, AI security, and more. You can go to bluecert.org to take a look at all of their offerings. You can explore the certifications. Here we have certifications on machine learning, AI healthcare, AI in finance, natural language processing, and many more. If I go to machine learning, you can see the different potential roles that are available for machine learning as developers and even different paths that are available. And this provides you with AI-focused specialization, flexible online exams, and also employer recognition. You can also check out some of the sample multiple choice questions on that category. If you're looking for certification for machine learning or AI related fields, check out bluecert.org. Hello everyone and welcome back. In this section, we'll be learning about arrays, also known as lists, and loops. Let's start with arrays, also known as lists. Now, you have already learned that if you want to store a name of a person, you can go ahead and create a name variable and store it. And this is perfectly fine. But what about if I wanted to store 5 names or 10 names or even 100 names? How would I do that? So whenever you want to store a list of people, a list of customers, a list of products, a list of numbers, you use a list, or also known as arrays. I'm going to go ahead and create an array called names. And inside the array right now, this is a syntax where when you create an array, you start with a block bracket and then you end with a block bracket. And once again, the great thing about arrays and the syntax is if you're using a very different programming language, this is how they would declare the array. In most programming languages, not all of them, all right? So right now we have created the array and the array is empty. You can see there's nothing in the array, right? Completely empty. So what we can do is we can add something to the array. I can add some names to this array. Stephen and Mary. So now this array contains 4 elements, 4 items. All of them are of type string. I was just waiting that you will guess it. String. See that? All of them are wrapped up with double quotes. So all of them are string. Now, it doesn't really mean that you can only store string in an array. Even in this array, which contains 4 strings, I can go ahead and store some other items which belong to a completely different data type. Over here, I'm storing integer, and then I'm storing a Boolean value. Now, although this is completely valid and it's not really going to give me any error, it's usually not the case in real life. I mean, if you are storing something in an array, usually those items are of the same data type and they are related. Related not in a way that John is related to Alex and Alex is related to Stephen, related in a way of data types, that all of them are numbers or all of them are Boolean, or in this case, all of them are strings. So there we go. We have created our array which contains 4 items. Now another thing to note about the array is how I'm using the variable name. Since it's an array and since it can store multiple items, I'm not calling it like a singular, like a name. I'm calling it names, plural. So it's a good habit to form early on that whenever you're creating an array or a list, make sure that the variable name is plural. Now, someone can say that, well, how about this? How about if I call it name list? Or I guess in Python syntax, kind of like this. This is also fine, but isn't names much simpler? And isn't names how you would use it in real life? So why make it complicated by saying name list? Is that how you will talk in real world? Well, here's a name list of, customers, or here is name list. You will say, well, here are the customers, or here are the names. All right. So this is very important that you get into the habit of naming things correctly early on. Now you can have another array, which is numbers, which has some random numbers. Okay, perfectly fine. You can also have an array called things. And in this, we can just add some random stuff. Like some are numbers, some are something else, and some are even some other arrays, right? And so on. So in things, which is an array, it contains the first item as a string. The second item is integer. The third item is Boolean. But look at the fourth item. Fourth item is another array inside the array. So that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly valid. If we take a look at an array called names, and we see that how it is actually constructed, kind of like behind the scene, how will it look like? Well, on the first item, we have John. On the second item, we have Alex. On the third item, we have who? Stephen. And then we have Mary. So this is, you can visualize it. This is how the items of the array are actually stored. And each of these items have an index. Now, the index is not really stored with the item, but you can think of it as kind of like a number that you can use to access the contents of an array. The index will always start with 0, as you can see, and that's true for all the programming languages, or at least most of them. That the index of the array will always start with 0. This means that if I go over here on line number 12 and I want to access Alex, I can say names, which is the name of the array. And then what is the index of Alex? 1. All right. And that is going to give me access to whatever is stored on index number 1. So names of 1 is going to point to, name the 1 is right here, Alex. And name will become Alex. All right. Same way, if I change this index and I say 3, then I'm talking about Mary. But what happens if I change this to 7? Let's see. If I go ahead and print out the name right now, what will be the value? I run it. And on line number 14, I'm printing out the name, and name value is coming from the array, but index number 7. Keep in mind that the index number 7 doesn't really exist. You only have 0, 1, 2, and 3. So as you can imagine, it's going to give you an error. It's saying index out of range, which basically means you're trying to access an index that does not exist. And in other programming languages, sometimes it can throw an error, sometimes it can just return you undefined, depending on the programming language. So you always have to make sure that you access the index that actually does exist. Or if it is throwing an error, then you catch that error and then you do something with the error. So that's the very important part. All right. So in this lecture, you have learned about how you can declare an array. Array can contain different elements, like a single array can have different elements of different types. You can have this kind of array, but in real life, usually you would have an array with similar items. Whenever you go to a website, right? I mean, it can be anything. Let's say if I go to hotels.com and I just search for a hotel over here. Doesn't really matter. Whenever you see a list of things that is being displayed, now that can be a list of anything, a list of tweets, list of Facebook posts, list of hotels. Whenever you see anything that is displayed as a list, you can think of it that behind the scene, they are using an array or a list, same thing. So if you look at it, this might have index number 0, and this will have index number 1 and 2, and so on. Obviously, in the case of hotels.com or most of these websites, they're not storing a string in an array, they're storing something rather more complicated. But the idea is the same. They do have an array behind the scene, which then gets displayed, as you can see. So whenever you go on a website and you see a list, or on your phone, you see a list and you're scrolling through a list, you can say, oh, that is an array of items. All right? Great. Now, in the next lecture, we'll be talking about how you can add item to an array and how you can remove items from an array.